We got 7 different stories from 7 different media news outlets, you guys. It's time for another episode of Regan's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of Regan's Newsround, where I cover 7 different stories from 7 different news outlets. And we start here with The Guardian with the headline of the UK government is under pressure from Tories to stop arming Israel. Lib Dems also call on action to suspend arms exports to Israel after 7 aid workers have been killed in Gaza. Now, obviously, this is a horrific tragedy that occurred with the. For those who don't know the story, so the World Central Kitchen had 3 cars of aid that they were going in. They were inside Gaza, going to specific destinations to help workers to help Palestinians who are dying from famine. And basically, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, were fully aware of their position. They were fully aware that they were aid convoys. They were fully aware. Everything was all checked off, and all this kind of stuff. And they were still hit with an IDF strike. All of the cars. Now they say that this was an accident and all this kind of stuff. But given the fact that they were already given all the information they were needed to be told that these were aid workers and not Hamas people. It's caused the reason why this has also caused international outrage is because so many international civilians have died because of this strike. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that there is pressure at the moment to stop arming Israel from the UK government, but it's quite infuriating when they're saying this now. Why have they been saying this? And it's like we've had 32,000 Palestinians killed, and because some British citizens who are absolutely heroes, working with the World Central Kitchen to provide food, medicine, and whatever people need in Palestine for the Palestinian people inside the Gaza Strip to try and help them, have given their lives to try and help these people, and they've lost their lives for doing so. I feel like that the only reason that the only reason, in my opinion, that the world is talking about is shouting about this now is simply because of its international civilians have died. That's generally it. Where was there's this. I do generally believe there is this perception that the world sees Palestinians, don't see them as, well, I'd say world governments, Western leaders are not looking at Palestinians as equals, and it's quite infuriating. And it's really, really, annoying. There are lots of words I could describe it, but it didn't need to happen. It shouldn't have happened. But 32,000 Palestinians have died. It had not needed to happen either. This needs to stop. We need a ceasefire. At the time of this recording, there hasn't been a ceasefire, but there may be one. I did cover a story where they may be that Israel had talked about a proposed ceasefire of some sorts with Hamas a few days ago, but I haven't heard anything from it since. So I'm going to go on the assumption that it's been rejected, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But speaking on this headline itself, on the UK government under pressure. It's good that they're under pressure, but again, I feel like it's too little too late. We've always supplied them with way too much. I do believe that the UK government, the British government, is complicit in acts of genocide because of the weapons that Israel have used. But I at the moment, as much as I want them to stop supplying weapons to Israel, I just don't think they will. I think they're so connected to, just like America, that they're so connected to, but they won't stop or cease weapons supplies. It is good that Nick Ferrari has said that we should halt or suspend Nick Ferrari of LBC, to say that as someone who is very close to Israel as well. It's nice that he has said that, because it does give some respite. Those who have been staunch defenders of Israel are been coming under a lot of pressure as well. There's a couple of people who are starting to turncoat a little bit. Like, this is one that they cannot defend, and it's impossible to defend. Um, are the Tories going to stop? I don't know as of right now, but I feel like they're just going to try and hog it out. I really, really do. The Conservatives, because that's do they really care what the public think? Because I think if they generally did, they would be doing a hell of a lot more with these upcoming local elections, the mayoral elections, and then the general election, whenever that may be. There's no sign that they're doing anything for the benefit of ordinary people like you and I. Some ministers are under pressure from Tory Conservative MPs and peers to stop arming Israel after 7 humanitarian workers were killed in an airstrike in Gaza. 4 Conservatives told The Guardian on Wednesday that the UK should stop exporting arms to Israel after its strikes, which killed 3 British aid workers. The intervention comes after Peter Ricketts, a government national security advisor during David Cameron's premiership, said the time had come to send a signal to stop exporting arms. David Jones, the Conservative MP for Clyde West, said the Israeli strike on the aid convoy was extraordinary. The government should urgently reassess its supply of arms and deliver a stern warning to Israel about the conduct. Israel has every right to defend itself and every right to act proportionally, but that doesn't include people that you are trying to do good, he said. Given that we've seen 3 British citizens, all of them ex-forces, killed in what is at best a negligent manner, I think that we really need to reassess our supply of weaponry there. I thought that Netanyahu's response these things happen in war was complete inadequate, frankly shameful inadequacy. It is very, like, he's saying, like, brushing it off like it's, it was an accident. They haven't apologised, by the way. They're not sorry, Israel. They're not sorry about this. Just for the record. Paul Biscoff, the Conservative MP for Peterborough, said, "The thought that British-made arms could be used in actions that kill innocent civilians in Gaza turns the stomach. The fact that we have now seen British aid workers killed while trying to feed families in Gaza, this must be a line in the sand." This has been going on. The British-made arms has been killing innocent civilians for a while, but the only reason they're kind of shouting about this now is because it's got mainstream attention. Flick Drummond, the Conservative MP from Meron Valley, said UK arms sales to Israel should be stopped for the foreseeable future. This has been concerned for some time, she said. What worries me is that the prospect of UK arms being used in Israel's actions in Gaza, which I believe have broken international law. They have been. We know they have been. Problem is they're only just realising this now. They're waking up to realisation. Hugo Swiner, former Foreign Affairs Minister in David Cameron's government, said, "I fully support the UK policy of selling arms to Israel in order for Israel to be able to defend itself from any would-be aggressor. What I do not support is the selling of arms which can be, and now looks like they are being used offensively in Gaza." Again, where have you guys been? Like, this has been going on for months. Alan Duncan, another former Foreign Office Minister, told the Charity Action for Humanity that the government's stance on armed exports to Israel is a matter of grave concern, particularly given Israel's blatant disregard for international humanitarian law. He called for an immediate arms embargo and immediate clarification of whether UK components were used in that strike that killed aid workers. Liberal Democrats called on Wednesday morning that UK arms exports to Israel should be suspended. The SNP said Parliament should be recalled from Easter to discuss the recess to discuss the crisis. Yes, they should, but they're not going to. We know they're not going to. Rishi Sunak told The Sun's Never Mind the Ballots show on Wednesday that Israel's conduct in Gaza had become increasingly intolerable. The Prime Minister said licensed arms were kept under careful review according to regulations and procedures that we will always follow. Lord Ricketts, who is also former permanent secretary of the Foreign Office, told BBC Radio 4 Today programme, "I think it's abundant evidence now that Israel hasn't been taking enough care to fulfil its obligations on the safety of its citizens." Nah, you don't say. You only just realise this now. And a country that could get arms from the UK has to comply with international humanitarian law. So a condition of the arms export licence. So honestly, I think the time has come to send that signal. Excuse me, guys. Very early in the morning here. It's all well and good. Again, like, it's all well and good saying all these things, but I feel like it's already caused too much damage. The message won't change the course of the war. It would be a powerful political message, and it just might stimulate debate in the US as well, which would be a real game changer. The US is pressuring the UK to continue its arms. I'm sure of that. The challenge for Labour to maintain a united front on the issue were apparent on Wednesday in a joint appearance in London by the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, where the latter says there is now a case for halting arms sales. If the government's legal advice says what people suspect it says, then the government should be halting sales, Khan said. After she agrees, Arrays reiterate the party line that Labour was urging the government to publish any reports it had on Israel's compliance with international law. So they're not completely on board, but what basically the league, they were given legal advice saying this. They were given legal advice on this, and they've kind of ignored it. So this is the strikes on the World Central Kitchen convoy there. The convoy was reportedly travelling south from Dela Ali towards Rafgath. Vehicle 1 and Vehicle 2 where it's appeared, and Vehicle 3 there on the map where the strike happened. And you can see here the strikes there, and you can clearly see on the top of the car it says World Central. It says there very clearly World Central Kitchen, so it's very clear. But they still struck the vehicles just regardless. In a statement on Wednesday afternoon, David Laming, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, said that if the government's legal advice says there is a clear risk that UK arms might be used in a serious breach of international humanitarian law, it's time to suspend the sale of those arms. The 7 aid workers who had been delivering food to Gaza were killed on Monday by an Israeli drone. Those killed, 3 British citizens, a Palestinian, a US-Canadian dual citizen, a Pole and an Australian, were working for the World Central Kitchen, the WCK, an international charity. Rishi Sunak has called for an urgent investigation into the Israeli airstrike. There's no investigation. I know there needs to be an investigation, but there's no investigation needed to be. It's very clear that what happened here. The 7 victims were named by WCK as Britain's John Chapman, 57, James Henderson, 33, and James Kirby, 47, who were working for the charity security team. The team's leader, Zomri Francom, 43, an Australian national, also died along with Jacob Figelin, 33, the American-Canadian dual citizen, Damien Sobol, 35, a Polish national, and Sali Abram Adu Tala, a 25-year-old Palestinian. On Tuesday, Israel's newspaper Haaretz published details of the strike, citing defence sources. According to a report, an Israeli drone fired 3 missiles at the convoy of the 3 armoured cars, all of which were clearly marked on the roofs and sides with WKD's logo, because of suspicion that an armed militia was travelling with them. The thing that strikes me because of this, because of this is obviously cited from Israeli newspaper. I wonder if the Palestinian wasn't in there with them, would they have struck it? Does leave me any questions, doesn't it? Despite the fact that the suspects did not leave a warehouse for the rest of the group, the cars were hit as they travelled back along a route pre-approved and coordinated by the Israeli Defense Forces, the report says. Lieutenant General Heves Haves, the chief of the General Staff of the IDF, said the incident was a mistake that followed a misidentification during the war in the complex conditions, and it should never have happened. Now, again, it's all well and good saying these stuff, but the fact is the damage has been done, the lives have been lost, you can't undo it, and it's just infuriating, guys. It's really, really infuriating that they did not need to die, just like so many innocent Palestinians did not need to die. We need to stop these weapons supply arms now. We should have stopped them yesterday. We should have stopped them last week. We should have stopped them last month. But it's quite infuriating for them all to say this now when it should have been said ages ago. Yeah, it's just really infuriating, guys. It's frustrating, and it makes me sick to my stomach that as a British citizen, we are creating weapons that are being used to kill innocent people. I don't like the fact that we're creating weapons in the first place, but the fact that we're using them on the innocent people does make me sick to my stomach, and it really, really does, guys. So this next one here I've got for you guys is going to be quite a long piece. This one is from an exclusive from Sky News. So, is the UK preparing for war amid threats of conflict? And here's what Sky News has found. So, in the first instalment of the series called Prepare for War, Sky News has decided to explore how prepared the UK government, its military, and the entire nation is for possibility of armed conflict. So, I didn't cover this. I had thought about covering this in a separate video, but I think I'm going to cover it here on Regan's Newsround. So, before we obviously dive into this, and this is quite a long piece, guys. I do think that we do need to be prepared for every contingency plan, every contingency option. I do believe that the the military and defense and our defenses do have some pre-prepared plans in place, outside of whatever the political atmosphere is. Even with an incompetent government like the Conservatives, I don't think they're hampering too badly on when it comes to what MI6 and intelligence sources and the military are doing there. I do think we do have an issue when it comes to the lack of recruitment, and I've spoken about how more can be done to challenge that. But we also have many issues within the UK as it is that needs to be dealt with. And then a question then becomes, well, how much of a priority is being ready and prepared for war compared to the situations that many people up and down the United Kingdom, citizens as a whole, how much does that matter? What isn't it not the priority of looking after its people as well? But also the counter argument is that we need to be prepared to defend the nation whenever it needs to be. Well, I think you also have to remember that we are part of the NATO alliance. Now, if we were to leave NATO, then I'd be very terrified, considering our military. And yes, we do still have a decent military, I would say, in comparison to some other countries. Yes, it has shrunk over the last year since the fall of the British Empire. There's no question about that. And obviously, they would love. Obviously, military commanders and chiefs would like nothing more for us to spend more money on the more big toys out of our taxpayer money. But I just think, given the current situation, given our economy, given the current cost of living crisis, ordinary people are really struggling. I kind of feel like this part of me feels like this needs to be a back burner sort of thing. I do think the UK still has a role to play in the world, but I don't think we should be policing it. But I do think we should have a role to play in the world, and I think that does matter on that regard. So let's read into this piece, guys. So the government has no national plan for the defence of the UK or the mobilisation of its people and industry in a war despite renewed threats of conflict, Sky News has learned. Now, this current government would not surprise me, but perhaps an incoming Labour government may draw up some plans if need be. With ministers warning that Britain was moving to a pre-war world amid mounting concerns that China, Russia and Iran can be revealed, that officials have started to develop a cross-government national defence plan. That any shift back to a Cold War style ready for war footing will require political leaders to make defence a genuine national effort once again, rather than something that is just delivered by the armed forces, according to interviews in multiple defence sources from senior officers and academics. Again, where would you get the money for all this? Like, again, it's all well and good saying this, but where is the money going to come for this? Can we tax the rich for them for defense as well as taxing them for everything that we're suffering from? They said that such a move will require a lot of investment in defence and much better communication with the public about the need for everyone to play their part in strengthening UK's resilience and deterring aggression. I do think communication is definitely one. I don't think we definitely have that communication with the UK Armed Forces enough. I do think that's something that can be improved without having to put too much out your hand in the pocket on that one. We have to have a national defence plan, a senior defence source said, speaking on the condition of autonomy. It should involve what government arrangements look like in that period of before the armed conflict and the transition to war. So here is the first piece of Sky News series can also be revealed. A 2-day war game set to take place next week involving officials from the Ministry of Defence, Cabinet Office, Home Office and other departments to talk how the country would respond to an armed attack. A paper is circulating in Whitehall that examines what can be learnt from an old but comprehensive system of plans called the Government War Book, now sits in the National Archives, that once detailed how the UK would transition from peace to war. Sources says lessons would also be drawn from how the UK mobilised its industrial base ahead of the Second World War, when it created a network of shadow factories to vastly expanded production capabilities of aircraft such as Spitfire. This is British soldiers doing drills near Tampa, Estonia. They were conducting drills in Finland, I believe, as well. If not this year, late last year as well, when Finland joined the NATO alliance, they were conducting joint drills together. Obviously, just there to prepare in case Russia ever decides to invade a NATO country. Graham Sharps, the Defence Secretary, used a speech in January to raise the spectre of a pre-war world. He also forecast that in 5 years' time we could be looking at multiple threats involving Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. Given the warning signs, Sky News has decided to explore how prepared the UK government, its military and its entire nation are for the possibility of armed conflict. We have to look back at the last time Britain was in a pre-war world, and that was 5 years before the Second World War that erupted in 1939, as well as this country subsequently dealt with the possibility of World War III, including nuclear attack during the Cold War. Now, I think it's very important to make clear that Britain was very, very different back then. And we were a British Empire, and we had lots and lots of territory all across the world around that time. Things are a lot different back then compared to now, that is for sure. But I can understand why they would have to use some of that, because that was the last time we were preparing for ourselves for war. In the first instalment of the series called Prepare for War, we visit the National Archives to view a government war book, travelling to an old nuclear bunker once part of a secret plan to support the nation in the event of a nuclear war, and examine the legacy of the Second World War shadow factories which built the weapons that helped defeat the Nazis. The problem is there is no plan. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? This sounds familiar. Setting out a challenge to Keith Deer, a former regular Royal Air Force intelligence officer who worked as advisor to the Prime Minister between 2020 and 2021. When Boris Johnson was in power, said he was unable to find any kind of detailed plan for the war while in government. He said specific planning is required to expand what we think we could happen, and specifically what needs to do what, when, and to respond efficiently. All this stuff matters. You know, how to be able, whenever these these plans that needs to be in place, they're there to protect us if we need it, if they ever happen. Yes, these are unlikely events, but they can happen, and we should be prepared for any and all situations and have a plan in place if these situations occur. Right, what do we need to do? Right, we need to go to this plan because this is the one the best use in the best response to this. So that there is no sitting around table when you have less than 5 minutes to make a quick fire decisions sort of thing. Because you're playing with lives, you know, in this kind of thing. In an exclusive article for Sky News, he wrote, such plans are essential not only to avoid scrambled disorders and early defeats, but also to see our adversaries awed by our preparedness and deterred from fighting in the first place. The problem is there is no plan. Instead, defence sources said the UK today relies on its arsenal of nuclear weapons and membership of the NATO military alliance to deter threats. The government assumes deterrence will always work, but no one stops to ask, what if it doesn't, a senior defence source claimed. And I think that's a fair point. Yes, just because we have nuclear weapons doesn't mean that we are guaranteed that safety. And like I've said, yeah, being a member of the NATO alliance does help us a lot. It does help give us that assurances. I'd rather have less nuclear weapons, if I'm personally honest. I don't like the fact that we have nuclear weapons, and I know Scotland don't like having nuclear submarines in their country as well, looking after either. The apparent lack of a national defence plan means the Army, Royal Navy and Royal Air Force, let alone the readiness of the civilians' population and industrial base, are not designed to fight an enduring war survival, the defence source said. Our air defence, the ability to fend off incoming enemy missiles and drones, is dangerously thin, and coastal defence is all but non-existent, a senior defence source said. Why is that? Like, why do we not have I mean, it may sound silly, but why do we not have an anti-air missiles on the coast or something? Why do we not have that? Why do we not have some anti-air defence along the coast? Are we that predictable in thinking that we will never get attacked on the island? Why is that, honestly? There is also a shortage of weapons and ammunition, while the size of all three services, both regular and reserve, is a fraction of the force that must be kept of high-level readiness during the Cold War in case of World War III. Now, the shortage of weapons and ammunition, that's because we've been sending a lot of that to Ukraine. So we have to remember that. So there needs to be a bit of give and take there. General Sir Richard Barons, a former top commander, said he raised the idea inside government just over a decade ago about the needs to rebuild national defence and resilience because of the growing threat from Moscow. But the implications of thinking about the revitalization of a risk from Russia was implacable and expensive, and denial, frankly, was cheaper, he said. In the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, NATO refreshed its war plans for defending the whole of the now 32-nation alliance. But the UK has used its own corresponding set of national plans set out in its own government war book that would trigger certain internal measures if the alliance decides to transition from peace to war. A 1976 copy of the war book, a largest bundle of hand-typed pages, bound together by string, often a sense of how serious the UK once took national defence planning. Stored at the National Archives in Kew, West London, the war book contains details, lists and signposts the way to complementary plans on how to mobilise not just military but also civilian and industrial in a crisis, as well as shutting schools, clearing hospitals, rationing food and even storing national treasures. Perhaps maybe they should update this document. Concerned around the end of the First World War, the governments collected top secrets, regularly rehearsed and updated war books, ensuring the height of the Cold War. The UK was one of the best prepared nations in the world and most resilient. That all changed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, as Western governments no longer felt existential threats of global war. By the early 2000s, the entire UK war book system, which cost a lot to maintain, was quietly shelved as the then government focus switched from threats from Islamic terrorism to fighting foreign wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It means most senior officials in today's Whitehall will barely have any professional memory of how the state functioned during the Cold War years, let alone the two world wars. Jonathan Boff, a professional of military history at Birmingham University, said the UK should think about producing a modern-day version of the war books. I agree. I think we should have a modern-day version of the war book. I don't think it hurts to have that. I generally don't think it will hurt, for the United Kingdom to have one. And perhaps even maybe individual nations should consider one as well. That's the kind of thinking. The thinking that what takes you from. We don't need to worry about any of that too. We actually didn't want to worry about that. How might we do it? I think it's really important, he said. So, Risk Register and Resilience Framework. Asked about the allegations that the UK has no national plan for the outbreak of war, spokesperson for the Cabinet Office said the country has robust plans in place for a range of potential emergencies and scenarios, with plans for supporting arrangement development refined and tested over many years. This includes the Civil Contingency Act, a government resilience framework, a national risk registrator with a strengthening of ties of a network of local resistance forums across the country that are now tasked with responsibility and emergencies. There is also a new directive in the Cabinet Office targeted with further enhancing resistance. As part of broad emergency responsibilities, all local resistance forums have plans in place to respond to a range of scenarios, the spokesperson said. The government continues to review the risk landscape, including threats to UKs from overseas. Yet, a flick through the National Risk Register offers a lot more information on floods, pandemics, terrorism and cyber attacks than what they do in the event of a war. Yes, we do have these things. We do have contingency plans for all these things, but is it time we should have one for war, an updated one? To me, it doesn't hurt to have that there, a modern one there. It should not hurt. It doesn't hurt us to have one. A number of local residents forums approached by Sky News also confirmed that they do not have a specific war plan or planning for a nuclear strike, something that would have been a top priority for local governments during the Cold War. Again, we should have these plans in place if we need them. We should just have them. Okay, the chances of us getting into a nuclear war with Russia may not be likely. They're very unlikely. The chance of us actually going in direct conflict with here on these shores is unlikely right now, but that can change, and we should be prepared for any and all outcomes. And I'm pretty sure European nations have those in place as well. The funding provides for many NATO allies, including the UK, changed following the demise of the Soviet Union in 1991, with investment switching away from defence to areas such as health and social care, more popular in peacetime. This has started to be reversed following Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but defence sources said it must happen for much greater urgency, especially as Russia is on the war footing and has even threatened the use of nuclear submarines. So back in 1935, when war with Adolf Hitler's Germany was looming, the UK began rapidly growing its manufacturing base to build more aircraft, converting automatic plants to produce Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancaster bombers and other kits. The shadow factories were set up in 1930 there. The R.J. Michael Centre, dedicated to the memory of the regional Joseph Mitchell, 1895 to 1937, designer of the world-famous Spitfire. A program called the Shadow Scheme under the then Air Ministry saw the construction of shadow factories next to existing automotive turned aircraft plants. But the UK's manufacturing landscape had considered in recent years, while many weapons are imported, making it harder to review sovereignty industrial capacity at speed. Keith Deere, the former Downing Street advisor, pointed at the difficulties Britain has had increasing the production of artillery shells and other ammunition to support Ukraine. Our inability to supply anything like the munitions or weapons to Ukraine shows that how hollowed out we have become to by buying and building armed forces to no coherent war fighting plan, he wrote. Weapons without ammunition are useless. They are absolutely useless, guys. What good is a gun if it doesn't fire? It isn't. We aren't ready, but don't tell Putin. Well, you've just told him. Well done. Southampton is a reminder of the UK's former wartime resilience. The home of the Spitfire production line was dispersed around the city after the German borders attacked its two main aircraft factories early in the Second World War. Today, Alan Matlock, a local man, heads a group called the Spitfire Makers Charitable Trust, which raised awareness about the historic bravery of Southampton's resistance. The front line did through these factories, he said, and there were a large number of people who paid the ultimate price. Vera Saxby, who turns 100 in August, decided to do a secretarial work for a company that made parts of the Spitfire during the war after a German bomb exploded in her garden. We really thought we were doing something good, she said. However, resting in an armchair in her house in Southampton suburbs, Miss Saxby said she did not think Britain was very resilient anymore, pointing in particular to the reduction in heavy industry, such as steelworks and car plants that were so vital during the last war. Yeah, not having these industries may really come back to bite us as well. Asked if it was worrying, Miss Salisbury said, well, it is, but I'm too old to worry anymore. I can't see how we would defend ourselves, but don't tell Putin that. Spokesperson for the Ministry of Defence said, we have a range of plans in place to secure and defend the country, which are reviewed and adapted in response to international security developments. These plans will be integrated as part of our contribution to our ongoing work to develop a cross-government national defence plan. We will further enhance our preparedness and strengthen our deterrence in the future. An interesting one to say the least, you guys. Interesting one to say the least. I will say that while, yes, of course, working within our international partners in NATO and European and American allies in preparing for whatever conflicts that may or may not arise and be prepared for them is well and good, we should also be prepared ourselves for whatever prepared ourselves as our own nation if these things ever arise. Yes, international cooperation is important, but just looking after ourselves is also important. Just have these contingency plans in place. And the point, one of the points that was made in there, which I thought really struck me, was how much our manufacturing industry has shrunk since we left the EU. And I just wonder that perhaps that could play a serious factor into things. And while we are still as a nation creating weapons arms, because we know we're creating weapons arms that is sending them to Israel, I know, so it is good that we still have them, but I just wish we weren't sending them to Israel, if I'm honest. I don't have a problem with it going to Ukraine, with munitions and that going to Ukraine, because they are friends that need help, because they are in a war that they did not start in any way, shape, or form. It does gives me pause for thought. That's food for thought on this. But I thought this was a very interesting one, and I'm interested to read the next series of this Prepare for War series that Sky News has put together, and I think it's an interesting one to say the least. I'm definitely going to go out of my way to watch the videos as well on Sky News, because I think it's and I would encourage you to do so as well, because it gives us paints a bit of a picture of the situation that the UK is in when it comes to defence. Interesting one to say the least. So we're going to be completely switching gears from that, but just before we do, guys, if you haven't already, you can make Ollie a very happy octopus here. by hitting that like button and sharing it across social media so others are notified of this video. And if you're not a subscriber already, please consider subscribing. It really does help support the channel. The orb will be empowered by hitting that thumbs up button, guys. It really does help out. And if you're lucky, the lava lamp may form before the end of the show as well. So any of that stuff really does. Ooh, let me just make sure it definitely didn't. Yep, definitely didn't knock it. So yeah, any of that stuff, guys, really does help support the channel. So thank you for those who do so. So switching gears, this is one from the BBC. It's a short one, but I just wanted to highlight this. I've already spoken about this a little bit in one or two other streams and videos, but I just wanted to highlight this one from the BBC. So Labour has committed to the full Tory childcare expansion plan. Labour will back the childcare expansion plan being rolled out by the government if it wins the next general election. Now, before I read into this, I think I said this on the live stream on the Snowflake Watch, that it's like, I understand that Labour don't want to upset people, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself that they can't possibly commit to this because they're going to need to really put their hands in their pocket in order to make this work. The childcare plan, the sector is just not ready for it. There's not enough staff. There's not enough businesses to do this. Too many parents are going to be asking too much, and too many people are just going to opt out of the scheme. It's just not going to work. So what are Labour going to do if they're committing to the same plan that the Conservatives are doing? What are they going to do to make things easier make it easier? Is the question that I have on my mind. Because I don't know what Labour are going to do, because the Conservatives are just expecting the private sector just to pick things up. And if Labour are expecting the private sector to just pick things up, that's not how it's going to work. They're going to have put their hands in their pocket. The state's going to have to put its hand in its pocket if they want this plan to work. Because I'm assuming that's the reason why they backed it. Or they just said this to keep the right wing quiet. So Labour will back the childcare expansion plan being rolled out by the government if it wins the next general election. The Shadow Education Minister Bridget Phillipson said Labour will not remove any entitlements promised to families in the future. The government announced an expansion of free childcare to all children under 5 in England in the budget last year. There are 3 phases of expansion, with the final one in September 2025. Previously, 30 hours of free childcare was available for working parents with children aged 3 or 4, although that was limited to 15 hours a week and at least one parent earning more than £100,000. From the 1st of April, working parents with 2-year-olds are eligible for 15 hours of free childcare, and that will be extended to 9 months from September this year. From September 2025, the third phase will see hours of free childcare doubled to 30 hours a week for eligible parents. Previously, it said the expansion would not be reduced if the party takes power in the general election expected to take place in 2024. The party has also commissioned a review of childcare led by the former senior Ofsted figure Sir David Bell in October. Ms Phillipson told the BBC Newsnight programme last month that Labour would not commit to the £4 billion plan, saying the government risks crashing the childcare system due to a lack of place for parents with struggling providers. That sparked an attack by the Education Secretary Julian Keegan, who claimed that Labour could put the scheme at risk. In a letter to her Labour counterpart, Ms Keegan wrote, "Parents have told me that they are now uncertain about whether they should go back to work, grow their families, or take a promotion because they don't know if they will still have this childcare provision. Will the Labour Party commit to supporting our policy and giving working parents 30 hours of free childcare a week from when their child is 9 months old when they do start school?" It doesn't matter, right, what Labour was saying, right? Like, for her to, she and her government don't even have a plan with this damn childcare. They threw it the last minute at threw it at them. They literally thrown it at the private sector, expecting it just to make it work. Little to no funding. If not, how would you make up for 60,000 fewer people in work that our policy will support? Ms Phillipson promising with a letter of her own promising to reform childcare system that will stand the test of time. I'm delighted to see the Conservatives have finally woken up to the importance of childcare after 14 years of smashing the system to pieces, she wrote. As we have made abundantly clear, Labour will not remove any entitlements offered to families now or those promised to them in the future. Your suggestion to the contrary is an outright lie, and the public will not believe a word of it. The The party has published a dossier with some parents complaining of high costs and extra fee pays, while others reported an 18-month waiting list for some nurseries. Yes, and I spoke about this again yesterday on the Snowflake Watch, that you're just going to have to wait, sometimes even 2 years. It's just the way it is now. One nursery warned it could be forced to go bust under the government's expansion offer, the dossier claimed. Ms. Keegan said she was confident that Childcare sector is ready to deliver the offer and make sure parents have the childcare they need. She said, last year we're committed to delivering the largest ever expansion of childcare that England has ever seen. And with over 150,000 children being about to begin accessing a government-funded childcare place in just over 2 weeks, it's clear that our plan is working. Is it working, guys? Is it working? No, of course it's not working. I've already spoken about this yesterday, but I'll say it again here, guys. I don't think it was right for Labour to jump on the bandwagon to commit to this. I don't think it was right for them, because they kind of dug themselves into a hole on this by committing to it, because they're basically saying, regardless of regardless of how difficult the challenge is, we're still going to commit to this. Okay, well, we're going to be making reforms, so what does that mean? You're going to be making cuts somewhere? Because that's generally what I think is going to happen, guys. There's going to be cuts somewhere now on this. That's kind of how I see it at this point. But we will wait and see when Labour, if they win the next general election, we will see how and what their plan will be. Obviously, I'm sure details will come out in the manifesto in the run-up to the general election as well, so we will keep an eye on that as well. What's that, Ollie? Oh, right. We've got some news to give to them. Oh, okay. We got some broken news that has just come in for you guys. Just give me 1 second here. It looks like we've got some broken news coming in. Larry and Paul, take it away, guys.
Welcome to Broken News. New research has shown that men who drive large SUVs or enormous American pickup trucks have massive throbbing cocks. Scientists have been studying what's known as the wank panzer effect. Our reporter has more.
For years, men who pootle around residential areas in massive four-wheel drives have been accused of compensating for something. But researchers say there's strong evidence that each one of these men has impressively large, veiny and perpetually tumescent wangs. It had been previously thought that those who owned unnecessarily large vehicles had sad grey button knobs like little cashew nuts, with miniature, brown, empty, crinkly walnut ball bags. But there is, according to this report, a direct and linear correlation between the size of the vehicle being driven and the size of the driver's glistening, hefty and leaden meat obelisk. The report authors say that whether the vehicles are being used as intended in difficult off-road conditions or being used to crawl at 7 miles an hour down the B6157 at rush hour, you can be sure the driver has a hulking single-barrel pump-action yoghurt rifle with monumentally capacious bollocks. The findings claim that if a chap doesn't drive an oversized vehicle with enough torque to pull a house down, he may well have a twig and berries that barely registers on the quantum scale, laughably small apple pit balls and an almost indistinguishable Lilliputian micropenis or nano-nubbin. But a fella popping to Lidl for a £3 bottle of wine in a Ford F-150 Raptor with 700 horsepower will likely be the proud owner of a bulky beef trunk and full sonorous balls positively gurgling with fizzy man fat. Back to you.
Bob, thank you. Well, in a statement just in, the people behind this study said, "Our report has now proven that a male driving around a town centre in anything other than a vehicle designed for tactical deployment on the battlefield will statistically have a dick like a baby's winky on a cold day. But males using a 4.4 litre twin-turbo V8 Range Rover Sport to travel less than half a mile to do the school run will have a flabberjacker with at least 150% larger lob than average and be in the 95th percentile or above on the throbbidity scale." What a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Very interesting story there from Broken News. Very, very interesting story to say the least. Very, very manhood story there from Broken News. That's not the kind of story that I was kind of I was looking forward to, Ollie. I wish you kind of given me a heads up on that. I really wish Ollie would have given me a heads up on that story, if I'm honest, guys. Yeah, I know, weird one, guys. But there you go. That was the broken news story, guys. So before we go into the next one, guys, if you haven't already, please consider becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. By being a YouTube member, you financially support me in the work that I do here, which really does make a massive difference. And you can do so by becoming by just 99p, and you can also do so by becoming a $2.99 member, where you get early access to my content as well. If you want to support me in other financial ways, you can do so by buying me a coffee as well. The link for that is in the description, or you can even sign up to my Patreon as well. Gives you some access to some other content there if you join me on Patreon. And I also do additional content both on Rumble and Patreon. Both the links for them are in the description. There's also a thing called the links tree, so you can check out all the social media links of all my contacts in the description down below, as well as our Discord community, which you are all more than welcome to join as well. Link for them all are in the description. So this next story, I think we've talked about stories related to this, but I think this one is quite, shall we say, a cause for concern. So this is exclusive from the Eye, guys. It's with the headline of "My sister-in-law is dead because of the abuse and torture at the Under Armour's factory." A relative of Turkish Akar, who killed herself while working at a supply for Under Armour, Columbia, and American Eagle, has called for more action. This is very cause for concern. We've talked about how people who come and work in the UK from other countries and nations, and how their well-being and looking after needs to be looked after, and this is a case of abuse of that. Let's read a little bit into this so you guys get the better picture of this. So a young woman who killed herself while working at a factory making clothes for major fashion brands has been tortured by a supervisor, a family member has claimed. Under Armour, Columbia, and American Eagle have launched an independent investigation into the suicide of Turkish Askar, revealed by the Eye. The 21-year-old Bangladesh migrant worker died in Jordan in November at the fine apparel plant. Sources claim that bullying and sexual harassment is common there, with labourers often being fined, having passports withheld, and working 16-hour days without weekends. British politicians say the case highlights the need for stronger laws in the UK to protect the 27.6 million workers estimated by the United Nations to be in forced labour around the world, often in the supply chains of Western companies. Mr. Keena's sister-in-law Asmu spoke to her relatives shortly before the worker took her own life in her dormitory. Ishmael and Miss Askar suffered abuse during her month at the factory. Miss Akina's supervisor tortured and abused her a lot and slapped her with a pipe, Amishku said. Tuniska had to bear the abuse and cry a lot. During her phone call, she added Miss Akina wanted to complain but worried that no one would listen. And that's the thing with these outside the UK, outside these countries where there is little to no workers' rights whatsoever. And the problem is that the companies, well, I'm sure what they will say, Armour will say when we get down to the bit, is that they'll say they will investigation and they will take any kind of these actions very seriously. But at the end of the day, these are a lot of other companies who work with some of these manufacturers who create the products for them. They kind of like turn a blind eye to them in a way, just for the underlying cheap buck that they can make. And this should not surprise people. We know this is happening. It just doesn't get highlighted enough. And companies working here in the UK and others need to take more robust action to protect workers who are producing any products for them. Miss Akika's relative spoke to I via translator from Adwa Foundation, a Bangladeshi organisation campaign to improve the rights and conditions for garment workers. The factory owner, Jordan manufacturer Needlecraft, said its team recognises the severity of the allegations and are working to prevent any potential future occurrences. So this is apparently a picture. This is the fine appeal factory, which is located in Ziguri Sangwa, about 10 miles outside the capital, Arnhem there. On the day that Miss Akika died, she told Ismu that she was ill and had gone back to her dormant early. Since she couldn't work, the leader beat her again and abused her a lot, her sister-in-law claimed. When she advised Miss Akika on the phone to go to the police, she remained silent. Miss Akika's colleagues found her body a day later. She said, "I'm 100% sure that she died because of the leader's torture. Had she not been treated so badly, she would not have died and would not have thought of dying. No one should die like that. I want to tell the buyers and garment owners that the treatment should not be suffered by any other worker in that factory." Needlecraft have pledged to continue paying Miss Akika's salary to her family for 2 years following the tragic death, but her sister-in-law said this was not sufficient. Taniska's family is very poor, she explained. Taniska used to run her family. After her death, her family has become helpless. How can they live with so many people? The senior Labour MP Liam Bride, chair of the Commons Business Committee, said to the Eye's supreme important story on Taniska's death highlights the need for stronger UK laws to toughen up supply chain governance. Mr Bride said the case served as fresh evidence as to why the government's failure to present its modern slavery bill before Parliament was such a mistake. The Home Office says it continues to examine the case in time for legislative changes. Laura Young, a crossbench peer who founded the Parliamentary Group on Ethnics and Sustainable in Fashion, said the investigation both dismays and galvanises at the same time. She has put forward a private member's bill which would include a duty to prevent human rights and environmental harms in firms' global supply chains by conducting their due diligence assignment. This bill, which is awaiting its second reading in Parliament, could be enforced by criminal prosecutions. Baroness Young said, "I'm tired of reading how these brands supposedly take such allegations seriously or think that sending in auditors to inspect working conditions is an effective way of monitoring abusive situations." It is. That's what they do. They send in an audit guy to make, and then on the day it's like, oh, it all looks like you guys have made things all better. Now I'll go home, bye, and then they go, and then it's back to normal. That's how it goes. No, it needs to be 24/7. They need to make sure that they are looking after the people that are working for them. These are just online photos showing Under Armour clothes being produced by workers that find appeal here. Scott Nova, the executive director of the Workers' Rights Consortium, joins calls for factories to take more action together with Under Armour, Columbia, and American Eagle. He said there is a great deal of cruelty towards workers in brands, global supply chains, in Jordan and elsewhere, but the connection the Eye is reporting between a culture of workplace abuse and a worker's decision to end her life is beyond egregious. Asked what action should be taken, Ms. Noah said, "For starters, there should be appropriate compensation for the family of Tiska Aka, not the pittance the factory is reportedly paying her, but far more. The termination of any managers and supervisors who have treated workers abusively or tolerate the abuse, up to the most senior levels, and through documentation of all unpaid workers and deliver their full pay back." Jay Keir of the British campaign group No Sweat called for radical solutions to problems in the clothing industry. For anyone who thought sweatshops were a thing of the past, the horrific story behind Tuska's Askar's tragic suicide is a reminder that this is far from the case. He said the Eye's details expose the situation in Jordan shows that major brands have failed to fix the problem. Aniska Barenblatt, the CEO of Remake, which lobbies for improvement in conditions for garment workers, said the preventable and heartbreaking death of Ms. Askar appears to be so unfortunately all too familiar in the case of modern-day slavery. She added remedial audit actions as pledged by the implemented brands is simply greenwashing and window dressing. We instead call on Under Armour, American Eagle and Columbia to enter a binding agreement with their supplier. Christine Maliga, an activist with the Clean Clothes campaign, was upset but not surprised by the harrowing story. She said, despite fine work about responsibility and ethics on practicality of every brand website, the industry continues to be based on a race to the bottom logic, where impossibly low prices are the norm and cause a squeeze on wages and workers' rights. In the most extreme form, this leads to forced labour. A Needlecraft manager said his team was profoundly saddened by Mr. Aki's death and offered its most deepest sympathies to the family and loved ones. The management was determined to foster a safe, respectful and supportive environment for everyone, free from fear and intimidation, he added. Do you think so? I don't think. I just feel like the words are very, very hollow from Needlecraft. It feels very, very hollow, those words. He said workers' passports were only retained for visa renewals. Oh, really? To improve standards, the firm have introduced enhanced supervisor training, recruiting welfare officers and psychologists. Under Armour said it is deeply concerned by the alarming reports emerging from the fine appeal, which are wholly inconsistent with its required standards, stating that all suppliers and subcontractors must treat employees illegally, ethically and fairly. It added, "We are resolute in our commitment to take decisive action." Columbia said Miss Attica's tragic death was devastating for her family and colleagues. Alleging violations of its code of conduct cannot be tolerated and working on a remission plan, it added. American Eagle said it takes the allegations very seriously. It engaged with Needlecraft immediately in November to implement remittal action and is actively monitoring these via online visits. Again, like, it's like they say this now, but is this like, are there actually going to be more need to be done? And I do agree with the Labour MP that there needs to be stronger protections need to be put in place. Cross-party reference, and I'm pretty sure cross-party reference law needs to be put in place as well. Whether enough will be done, I'm very sceptical of that, if I'm honest, guys. But I mean, it's just, it didn't need to happen. It shouldn't have happened, and these things can be avoided. And it's really a choice. And I know we have very little powers outside the UK when it comes to these things, guys. But companies who are getting these supplies in from these outside countries, knowing that the workers who are working for them are being treated as slaves, literal slaves. Let's just call it what it is. They say forced labour, I call it slavery. I'm calling it flat out slavery. They need to these audits are not enough. More needs to be done. More vigorously needs to be done here. And if the businesses don't like it, well, then maybe they should look for a different supplier. Simple as that. But yeah, the British government and politicians and cross-party politicians need to come together for stronger action on this, because it is just far too weak. It really, really is. So the next one we got here, guys, this one is from The Independent. With the headline of "Migrant fruit pickers are saddled with debts of up to £5,500 to come to the UK through the government scheme. Farm labourers are telling people of Kazakhstan selling all their belongings to come to Britain." So, in a desperate attempt for people to come to the UK, they're selling up absolutely everything. It's easy, so easy for people to say, "Why aren't British people picking fruit?" Well, maybe it's because the wages just suck. And it's not as simple as that, These debts that these people are putting themselves through, I hate stories like this. I really hate stories like this, guys. Just like I hated the last one, that they putting themselves through this just to come to the UK. But this is through the UK's government scheme as well, which is like, let's read a little bit into this. So, migrant fruit pickers coming to the UK to work on farms are being saddled with debts of up to £5,500 before they arrive, are reporting to the seasonal worker visa scheme had found. The workers, many of whom come from Central Asian countries, are paying £1,231 on average to middlemen who help them get jobs through the government's seasonal worker scheme. Those from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Nepal and Indonesia are forking out the most to come to the UK, with many returning from their home countries in a worse financial situation than they started. This is a case of where the middle people are taking advantage of them. And they really do take advantage of them. And the thing is that what's being done about this? What do you think's being done? Most workers interviewed by researchers, 72% reported taking out a loan to cover the costs coming to the UK. One 32-year-old woman from Kazakhstan, named in a report as Amina, told academics, "A lot of people in Kazakhstan have sold their belongings or their assets just to have enough money to come here, hoping that it would be better here and they can just earn more money." Can you imagine? Sold everything that you own. There are some people who leave their jobs to come here because they are told that it would be better here. They see it on TikTok, Telegram, and Instagram videos, and everything looks perfect and beautiful. Well, once they arrive here, it's completely different. It's just an image, a deception. And this is the problem. People have this perception that everything is perfect and rosy when they look at online images and whatnot on social media and stuff. They're being manipulated into thinking everything in the UK is perfect. Excuse me. Now, I know that things in Kazakhstan are not perfect either, but they are being lied to about everything that's happening here in the UK. And they're being taken advantage of as well. This seasonal worker scheme allows UK growers to hire around 45,000 people a year on 6-month visas. An investigation by the Bureau of Investigation Journalism and The Independent uncovered evidence last year that agricultural workers who come to the UK were publicly humiliated, not paid for all the hours they work, and forced to live in substandard conditions. In other words, slave labour. In a new report, researchers at the Focus at Labour Exploration (FLEX) interviewed 83 migrants and got 399 survey responses from people on seasonal worker visa routes between June 2022 and October 2023. 2 in 5 workers reported receiving a contract in a language they did not understand. Recruitment workers from Central Asia is now almost 3 times higher than in Europe, with Kazakhstan emerging as the leading nationality. Osanga, a 49-year-old woman from Ukraine, said, "I would appreciate if we were told the truth before coming here, otherwise people would stop coming here for work. Usually people arrive, work for a bit, and then try to leave in a different farm." Several workers were said to have paid job finding fees or were charged an agency to access application systems that are free to use. This is the thing. People are taking it, again, I've said this, people are taking advantage of the situation where people who don't fully know and understand the schemes and whatnot. And it's easy for people to say, oh, they should just go online and read it up. Well, some of them don't have access to the internet. Some of them not sure where to look to get all the information they need, which is why they have these middlemen. But these middlemen take advantage of these people and rack in a lot of money at their expense. Sofia, 44, from Kazakhstan, said, "I was really struggling financially and I had to borrow money from my neighbours and relatives. I paid £600 to the third party who arranged everything for me." Amir, 48, was also from Kazakhstan, told researchers that he took out a loan from the bank to cover the cost of coming to the UK, but he hadn't paid it back yet. Nashil, 32, from Kazakhstan, added, "People are risking their assets and even selling their belongings or anything just to be able to come here with a hope to earn more money than they've just invested by selling their stuff. A lot of people have done that, sold their stuff, took out loans, everything here on the farm, and has taken out on loans from the bank of their country of origin to get here." One caseworker and an organisation supporting migrant workers said that some fruit pickers were returning to their home countries with a higher debt than they arrived. Oliver Fisher, research manager at Flex, said the findings of this research indicate that a large number of people on the scheme are being subjected to preventable risk, including risk of deception. "We know where the risks areas are on the visa route, and the research backs up what we have been saying to the government for years." A Home Office spokesperson said the welfare of visa holders is of paramount importance, including of seasonal worker schemes, and we are clamping down on poor working conditions and exploration. The seasonal worker route had been running for 4 years, and each year improvements have been made to stop exploration and clamp down on working conditions, while people in the UK will always take decisive action where we believe abusive practices are taking place on the conditions of the route are not met. Again, it's like there needs to be some kind of middle ground here that can protect people. It really needs to be some kind of middle ground. I just don't think it's working what they have. I just think. Well, let me correct myself. So it's working for the government, but it's not beneficial to migrants who are getting caught into a system or a cycle that they can't get themselves out, or into debts that they cannot pay back. It's a better way of putting it, I think. It is extremely frustrating. It is frustrating, and more needs to be done. And I think I've said this before about there needs to be some kind of independent body, not that people should know about and go to before they can apply for these kind of schemes, where they have to be told about these middle ground sort of things. There needs to be something in place. I'm not quite sure what, but there needs to be looked into this from the British politician side. Maybe even cross-party work action needs to be done on this, not just whatever government as well on this situation. We've got 2 more stories for you guys. Ollie is still grumpy, but the orb is almost coming to fruition. Just for you guys, we are more than an hour in, so got a long one here, guys. So this next one for you guys is from Open Democracy. It's the only story they've actually published that they've published over the last week or so. So they've been very quiet, actually, unless they're working on something big. So oil giants admit it needs a magic wand to keep green pledges, it says. So ExxonMobil accused of greenwashing over claims that its carbon capture project is reducing emissions. So really, so you know when these oil companies are saying that they're looking to go green and reduce emissions and play their part in working for in the environment, there's a 99% chance that they're saying a lot of hogwash, guys. They're saying a lot of hogwash. And it just feels like, you're saying this, but you're not really doing this, are you? That's kind of the feeling that I always get whenever I see an advert from these companies that are with these happy, smiley family faces or whatever, showing that we're doing our part to clean up the environment and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you're an oil company. Like, you're an oil company. If why don't you stop? Why don't you do something different? Transition out of oil then if you want to do your part. And it's just like, I just not. But like this idea that they are reducing emissions, this needs to come from political pressure. The problem is, guys, is that when the likes of American and British politicians, the problem is that they're in the back pockets of some of these oil companies, which is why there's not going to be any reductions of emissions coming from them. Because they own some certain politicians, which is why we need to make sure that politicians that we want going in are not influenced by these greedy oil fat pigs of companies that are racking in tons and tons of money at the expense of everyone else, as well as destroying the planet in the process. So an ExxonMobil boss has admitted that the oil giant will need a magic wand to deliver the climate pledge it boasts about to customers. So you're basically saying, we lied, is what he's saying. The company's UK-led Paul Greenwood had told Open Democracy a carbon capture project at his Foley oil refinery in Hampshire would only meet its target to be operational by 2030 if it receives taxpayer subsidies. Ha ha ha! They're asking you to pay! They want you to pay, guys! Are you kidding me? This is like the water company who was responsible for the damage to the environment and not upgrading our water systems after we've already paid them and saying, can you guys give us some money so we can fix it? Well, we're already racking in loads and loads of money already. That's how it feels. The cheek. Absolute cheek. Yet Exxon is still using its promise of the Foley scheme to help sell its petrol and diesel under its Esso brand. It suggests that its thoughtful driving campaign that drivers can fill up with less impact at Esso stations because the company is reducing its own emissions, citing it as unrealistic flawless carbon capture projects as an example of this. Exxon has so far refused to commit to its own money to build it, as it has instead focused investment on increasing diesel production at the refinery, spending £800 million to produce 6 million litres a day. Oh, they're spending £800 million. Couldn't leave some on the side here to, for this, No, okay. Expert says the firm is using a well-worn fossil fuel industrial strategy, making it ambitious, but vague claims about the future climate plans to avoid criticism of its oil and gas profits. Yeah, can't use any of that profits to improve its climate pledges. Yeah. Carbon capture and storage, CCS, involves isolating and trapping CO2 emissions where they are produced, such as power stations, refineries or incinerators. The captured gas can either be used to make products such as synthetic fuels or fizzy drinks. It can be transparent by pipelines or ships to a permanent storage site deep under the seabed. But the technology has developed at a snail's pace, according to analysis. There was just 41 CCS plants operating globally by the end of last year, none of them in the UK. None of them in the UK. Let's just remember that point. Collectively, they captured about 0.1% of the annual global CO2 emissions. Last year, the global energy watchdog International Energy Agency called on oil and gas companies to let go of the illusion that impulsively large amounts of carbon capture are the solution. Exxon plans for Foley would see the company build a new blue hydrogen plant that would make hydrogen from natural gas and capture 2.7 million tonnes of CO2 each year in the process. A report funded by the company claims it could begin operations in 2030. The report also claims that CO2 captured at Foley would be piped out to the sea and stored under the seabed somewhere off the Isle of Wight. It claims that the English Channel's carbon storage site could capture a total of 10 million tonnes of CO2 per year, including from other highly polluting companies near the Solent. The strain separates the Isle of Wight from the mainland. However, Exxon failed to disclose in the report it is yet to secure either a carbon storage licence from the English Channel or government support from the project. The firm applied unsuccessfully for government funding for the Foley scheme last year. Doug Parr, the chief scientist for Greenpeace UK, said, given the urgency of the climate crisis, the complete lack of urgency from which Exxon have approached the preparation for this project is telling. It is currently without funding or much chance of getting the government subsidy necessary for the project to go forward, and without a licence for CO2 dispersal or the data or investigations necessary to acquire them. Exxon helped launch a report in Parliament last month in the event attended by the Energy Minister Martin Callaghan and the Leader of the House of Commons Penny Mordaunt. Transport Minister Anthony Bowie and the Shadow Minister for Energy Security Alan Whitehead were also there. At the event, Open Democracy asked Paul Greenwood, the chair of SO UK and the lead company manager at ExxonMobil in the UK, whether its company would be able to fulfil its claim that it could start capturing CO2 at Foley by 2030. We are not there yet, he replied. It depends on where you go through the investment decision. If you wave a magic wand and you've said you've got all the investment you need, then you can hit that kind of timeline. Let's be very clear here, guys, before we go any further. These oil companies have shed loads of money. For them to say they require investment is nonsense. They have the money. They are choosing, they would rather the government pay them than invest themselves in these projects. Greenwood declined to say how much Exxon has spent to date on developing its carbon capture plans for Foley, saying that the number was completely irrelevant. He said Exxon could eventually spend £5 billion on the project, but added, until I get to the point where I'm committed to invest, I'm not committing to invest. Greenwood said the project was going to need some subsidies. There is no doubt about it. No, you guys don't need subsidies. You've got money. You can do it yourselves. The report is presented as the Worker Solent Cluster, a group of 120 businesses, councils and universities in the area. It is likely, however, that it is primarily ExxonMobil's own work. ExxonMobil was one of the 3 founding members of the Solent Cluster, and the small print wins. While we have made every effort to ensure the accuracy of this report, neither ExxonMobil nor ERM, a consultancy which advises ExxonMobil substantially, have made any reprobations or warranties regarding its quality, completeness or accuracy. The document promises £11.9 billion of investment by 2035 in its decarbonisation projects, 18,900 new jobs and 42% reduction in industrial emissions. It claims other major emitters in the sovereign area will also cut their emissions via carbon capture, including SSE, which owns a gas-fired power station, and Valoa, which runs a waste incinerator. When asked by Open Democracy, neither SSE nor Valoa would say how much of the £11.9 billion investment would come from them. The green pledges come as Exxon doubled down on its global fossil fuel investments. Last October, buying Shelley oil company Pioneer Natural Resources in a deal valued at $59.5 billion. Dollars. The company is also suing a group of its own shareholders who have filed a resolution calling for it to do more to cut greenhouse gas emissions. The shareholders say Exxon is the only one among 5 very large Western oil companies that have not set targets to reduce emissions from its use of products known as the Scope 3 emissions. Exxon decided to continue the lawsuit against the shareholders, seeking to have their resolution declared unlawful and thus preventing it from resubmitting in future, even though they withdrew it. So yeah, this is them trying to scapegoat from it, basically, their responsibilities. Bob Ward, Policy Director at the Grantham Research Institution on Climate Change at LSE, said given that Exxon currently refuses to acknowledge the scale of the Scope 3 emissions from the use of its products, any claims that its customers are reducing their implants are clearly greenwashing, particularly as its plans for carbon capture and storage in its Foley site are still far from becoming a reality. Mark Preston, Agri's policy manager at Benarina and the environmental campaign group that supports CCS and help decarbonise industry, said it would appear Exxon has little interest in actually deploying CCS in the timeline they are suggesting. Based on the claims they themselves are making, it really seems they are primarily weaponising CCS as a way to avoid tackling the real issue of phasing out internal combustion engines. At an industry conference last month, Exxon head of low carbon solutions Michael Foley admitted that progress has been slow in delivering the carbon catching plans. Yeah, you don't say. Very slow, guys. Very, very slow. He told Carbon Capture and Lucid Summit in Leeds, "We do not meet our collective ambitions over the past year for where we wanted to be today." Speaking to Open Democracy after the event, he said Exxon's 2030 target was aligned with our ambitions to win a government competition for carbon capture funding, which the company failed to do for Foley last year. But he admitted, as time progresses, the 2030 target becomes more challenging, and we will continue to work with the government on that. He also said that ExxonMobil will need to carry out further systematic testing of the proposed English Channel storage site to check its sustainability for locking away carbon. More technical work will be needed to fully appraise the location, he said. While Exxon has suggested the lack of government funding is to blame for the slowdown with the Slovene cluster. Again, they don't need government funding. They have the money themselves. These oil companies have the money themselves. They choose not to. It's very important. I really want to stress this. He only officially launched the project in 2022, years after other carbon capture projects in the north of England and Scotland have won government funding. Foley said Exxon had announced its UK carbon capture plan later than other companies because it was taking the time on our strategy. Yeah, take your time, guys. Take your time on your strategy while the planet continues to warm up. Yeah, just take your time, guys. Take your time. It's not like we've got, it's not like the planet's boiling up or anything. No, just take your time, guys. Yeah, just take your time. Any time now, Dustin Benton, policy director of the Green Alliance think tank and a member of the government's appointed body that advises on the delivery of carbon capture projects, says carbon capture and storage is likely to be a necessity to reach net zero, but the technology can't be used as an excuse to carry on drilling oil and gas or expand the production of petrol and diesel. Responding to Open Democracy's question, an Exxon spokesperson said, ExxonMobil is committed to playing a key role in the energy transition. This transition takes time and is not a linear process, a pace and direction shaped by factors including technology advances, enabling policy, economy and public support. He added, we will continue to engage positively with the government to demonstrate our capabilities with direct contributions that we make to net zero. And we are hopeful that these effects will help the Solvent cluster gain support to deliver its potential. It's just added here, due to a typing error, this article originally said that Exxon has spent £800 million to produce an extra 600 million litres of diesel per day. This has been corrected to 6 million litres there. So I just wanted to put that context in there with regards to it. But still, it's just like they don't it's just, for me, it's just like a lot of talk from these oil companies just to make it look like it's just for me, it's just a lot of talk. I want to believe that they are doing more, guys. I really generally do. I want to believe that they're going to do more to reduce their emissions, but I'm having a hard time believing it. They just want to keep going, continue to keep making money, making profit and whatnot. We're not going to reach this whole net zero thing. It's not going to. They're just going to try and kick it down, the cans down the road, and keep coming up with excuses after excuses to keep kicking the can down the road on this situation, guys. And it is really frustrating. It's very, very frustrating to say the least. So I've got one more story for you guys before we wrap up Regan's Newsround. And this one is from Byline Times. But just before you do, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, please hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. You will make Ollie here very, very happy if you do so. He's been grumpy all day. Will he turn his frown upside down at the end of the show? Well, only time will tell. So the headline from the Telegraph, Ugh, God, no. The headline from Byline Times is, the Telegraph takeover bid backed by UAE doesn't matter because there's an agenda in every newspaper. The former editor of The Independent provides an inside look into just how much influence the owner of British newspapers, including Rupert Murdoch, have on what gets written. And this is the thing. The fact that United Arab Emirates takeover bid is unlikely. It's not going to happen. Just because the state doesn't have control of it doesn't mean that these newspapers still don't have an agenda, because they do have an agenda. We know that that many media outlets within the UK have an agenda, and it's not in the interest of us. It's in the interest of themselves, of making a story, of making money, of influencing politicians, influencing the British public to believe in things, and not actually doing independent, actual, factual journalism, which is what Byline Times does. They're actually providing you stories. No tracking, no cooking here or cookies whatsoever on their website. So you can literally go on there and not be bombarded with advertisements or whatnot. This is a different kind of journalism, is what Byline Times does. They're not influenced by big shareholders or donors or anything like that. They make their money from subscriptions. People who invest and subscribe to Byline Times, those people are what help make the difference to Byline Times and the work that they do. So whoever takes over the Telegraph is still going to propaganda, mislead, and manipulate people into certain things. They may will, not to say that these newspapers that I cover on here, not to say that Telegraph and others don't provide some news stories, they do, but whether they are trustworthy or not is the question, and most of them are not deemed trustworthy. And we should always take whatever news we read with a pinch of salt. Always take things with a pinch of salt, you guys. So let's read what they have to say. Many years ago, I was a junior business reporter on Rupert Murdoch's Sunday Times. It had been decided that I was to write that weekend's main editorial based on an official report castigating Mohammed Al-Fariz over the purchase of the House of Fraser, which include Harrods. Frage, it seems, had been deliberately opaque about the true origins of his funding. We were having an editorial meeting, me and the paper and much more senior executives, about what the leaders should say and when who should walk in, but Murdoch. We all leaped to attention. He made a gesture for everyone to sit down, and then asked what we were discussing. They said I was just explaining the importance of the report, and that it was going to be the paper, and that it was going to be the paper's leader, and I was going to write it. Murdoch turned to me insequentially. Thanks, guys. Murdoch fixed me a stare. Son, who cares? Why does it matter? He inquired softly and slowly. Nobody else said anything. I was on my own. I was sweating, but the room felt chilly. Gulped. I blathered about how he could never be too careful, and how it was vital that people didn't lie about the source of their wealth. About how we had anti-money laundering rules to prevent this sort of thing, how organised crime was a growing problem, and we had to be more on top of it, and on drugs and terrorism. Murdoch looked blank. I could feel the ground opening beneath my feet. Then a man who was accompanying the press Mongol, a tall American in black, shiny crocodile shoes, said, "Hey, Roop, you remember that fight took us for $100 million down in Texas?" Murdoch turned to him and said, "You're right, he did." He wheeled round to me and added, "Son, write as hard as you like," and with that he and his pal walked off. Interesting. The Sunday Times was my first national newspaper. This was my first introduction to how preposterous secure a product that was to their tastes and beliefs. This was an overt example where the man himself was present. Most of the time he did not need to be. It occurred sublimely, self-censorship, reporting a story in such a manner that you would know would please the bosses, to stick an unwritten agenda and earn you an approval nod from on high. It occurs in the same way that every newspaper that I've worked, the Sunday Express, the Daily Express, Observer, the Independent on Sunday, Independent Evening Standard, it really happens everywhere. In every job, you just know what the chief thinks, and unless you're desperate to leave, you toe the party line. Which is why it was perplexing to read that so much guff about the proposed takeover of the Telegraph by a consortium backed by Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Vice President of the United Arab Emirates. Sheikh also owns Manchester City Football Club, and in that regard is being and in that regard, he's been a member of the UAE government is rarely mentioned. Reference him to the football press tend to dwell on his fabulous wealth. Yeah, people forget that. You know, get all this investment they do. A football club is very different from a major newspaper, but honestly, reading the howls of protest from some journalistic quarters, you could be forgiven for thinking that they are allowed a free hand in everything they write. Well, they've never been told to temper an argument, or as to say, have done it themselves without being instructed. Perhaps they are, in which case I must be a press rare species on my own. Wandering through the media landscape subject to the inability of expressing myself, I am not, because most articles do not touch the management floor. There have been occasions, though, when I've been encouraged to pursue a subject in which the owner has special interests. Again, I ask, has anyone not experienced the same? And provide what I write is true, and that is bad. To that list of titles, I could have added another, The National. That's right. For the last 4 years, I've written a column for the UAE newspaper owned by one Sheikh Mansour. Ah, I hear you cry. He told you to write this, you're under orders. Not a bit of it. In that period, I've had no contact with the Sheikhs or its official representatives. I do not speak to this paper's editor-in-chief, Mina Al-Arabi. That's rights of women's of change of newspaper. A concept still unfair to those main critics of the Mansour deal, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, and the Times. One piece I submitted was rejected. Post-COVID, a firm of consultants produced a study saying that luxury goods were over and that the outbreak had made us turn our backs on excess. I thought this would be a suitable column topic. Colleagues at the paper disagreed. They had plenty of evidence to show the claim was wrong. That blind was very much alive. I said I would choose another subject. As it was, they were right. The consultancy was wrong. Another piece on Al Fayed, I quoted him using a profanity against Prince Philip. It had to come out, and they said, to be fair, it probably would have done any British-based title. It may hurt the anti-Mansour investment, and it is an investment. His people are insisting they will only be a passive partner in the US-run vehicle. Brigade to learn this, but in my experience, the National is run along professional lines. It has a newsroom of the sort that they will recognise, and to my knowledge, there is not a UAE commissioner sitting alongside Al-Arabi and his senior team. It's staffed too by many journalists from across Fleet Street, from the Telegraph, the Independent, Daily Mail and others. Its editorial offices in UAE, London and Washington DC are fully manned and well resourced. I deal regularly with the London Bureau, and as far as I'm aware, the editor, Damien Bagoy, in ex-Telegraph, is free to cover whatever he likes. Because it is not so tightly constrained and are prone to the cycles of advertising as others, the National can keep its website open to all. A breath of fresh air in this age of paywalls and subscriptions, the paper has its mission, the Middle East explained. That's its USP, writing about the Middle East and yes, often providing a UAE slant. Is that awful? Is that where the title hails from? It's home. It's no different from London newspapers seen through the British eye. It's no different from either from pro-conservative newspapers or seeing things through a pro-conservative prism. Perish the fault. And Chris Blackhard, he is the former editor of the Independent newspapers, and this is his thoughts on the current situation. I hope you found that insightful, interesting thoughts to say the least. From him in my mind. That was interesting that he was in a meeting with Murdoch, but this is obviously only his words, and so you can choose to take it with a pinch of salt or not. What do I think of his thoughts and comments of his piece here? I mean, I still believe that that while there are times where they do have a bit more they do have some freedom, journalists in the British media. I do believe there may be a case that there's also sometimes too much freedom. I do think that too much freedom is a problem, and I think it needs to be addressed, because that freedom can really that freedom can sometimes lead to misconceptions and lies. Now, I'm not saying that newspapers don't lie. I'm alleging that some of them do. Some do, some don't. Some don't provide the most accurate information. Sometimes they are provided with the wrong information. These things can happen. However, it is the perception that they make as well. it's how they put the title in, how they describe a situation, describe a certain news story, describe a certain politician, and how it comes across really does matter. And obviously, some behind paywalls and others are not behind paywalls walls as well. Dictate whether people should sign up or whatnot to them. I actually want to read from the Telegraph, from the Times, from Financial Times and Bloomberg, but these are all behind paywalls, guys. If I ever at a position where I'm actually making decent money off this YouTube, believe me, I will pay into these so that we can see these stories, because I do think it's important for us to see the context of them. But I don't like paying for I don't like the concept that we should be paying for all information as well. But I do think information is money as well, though. But I say I don't like it, but then I'm a hypocrite, because that's what my channel is. It provides information for you guys. So it is hypocritical of me to say that. But it also depends on. It depends, it varies from opinion to opinion, I would say, when it comes to these. But does everybody have an agenda? I'd say so. Do I have an agenda? Yeah, I do have an agenda. My agenda is that, I want to call out where I believe misinformation is. I want to provide news to people. I want to inform people. That's why I do the short videos I do on TikTok, because people want people to know, hey, these things are happening in the world. You don't always see it, and it works. People find it appealing. It's informative. It's information. Information is a source of money, and that's what this channel is kind of about. It's not just about me and my opinions. It's about bringing you guys news to you guys as well. It's not just about my opinions, although some people here support me for my opinions and thoughts, but there's also the case that people simply are not interested in my opinions and interested in the information that I provide. So it's a bit of give and take, shall we say, which is why I think there are, because I've said this before in my updated channel. I have subscribers who it really intrigue on my opinions and want to know what I think about certain stories. There are some people who are subscribers who don't care about my opinion and they just want to know about the news stories. Then there are some who are actually not even subscribers who don't really care about news and politics, but are actually interested in maybe the podcasters that I host on the weekends as well. And there are some who just like the engagement of the live streams and premiere videos that we do during the week with other members. Everybody has different tastes and opinions and thoughts and whatnot. But having said that, Ollie is in a much better mood. The lava lamp has fully formed. The orb is there in all its glory. And as I say that, we've reached the end of Regan's Newsround, guys. What did you guys think of today? Over an hour and a half, guys. Let me know your thoughts on some of the topics we discussed today. Let me know your comments down below, guys. Talking about from the UK government under pressure to stopping the army in Israel. We're talking about the potential war that could come to the UK and how we are prepared or not prepared for it. Labour committing to the Tory Childcare plan. What are your thoughts on that? The story under the Armour's factory, we were talking about that as well. Migrant fruit pickers being piled up with debt to come to the UK to try and find a better life for themselves. ExxonMobil being slow about their progression, and of course the last story we just talked about with regards to Telegraph and newspaper and journalism, information and whatnot. Hell, you can even talk about the broken news that we also had as well from Larry and Paul. Let me know your thoughts about all the stories and more in the comments section down below, guys. Your feedback is always greatly appreciated. But just before you go, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. But if you want to go one step further and financially support me in the work I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.